Earlier today, Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke publicly for the first time on the standoff over Ukraine, criticizing the U.S. and NATO for having only addressed Russia's secondary concerns and not their fundamental concerns. He also accused the U.S. of caring less about Ukraine's security and more about restricting Russia's development. Still, Putin said Russia remains open to more talks, and he hopes a solution will eventually be found. Joining me now with more on this and what is happening in the UK is our good friend Congressman Mike Waltz of Florida. He is a member of the House Armed Services Committee. He is a ranking member on the Subcommittee of Readiness, a decorated Special Forces officer. He represents the 6th Congressional District of the Sunshine State. Congressman Waltz, welcome back to the program.
Hey, good to be with you, Tony. Thanks.
Now, we've talked before about the issues, the primary issues that Vladimir Putin is talking about, and that is to keep NATO, or Ukraine rather, out of NATO and NATO far from the borders of Russia. But do you see any positive signs that the diplomatic efforts here might be paying off?
You know, I don't really, Tony. And just to address that concern from Putin, I think it's really kind of a bit of a red herring. It's a feigned concern. He knows in order for Ukraine to enter NATO, it's going to take consensus from all 30 NATO states. And Putin also knows that Germany has issues with it, France has issues with it, so does Turkey. So that's a false concern. I think his deeper concern, his real concern, is that countries on his periphery prefer our values, prefer open markets, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, and no longer want to be under Putin's thumb. And Ukraine is heading towards a more Western-oriented direction, and Putin is determined to stop it in its tracks and is using some of these concerns. And I think, frankly, is using diplomacy, knowing that Biden, Blinken, and others will fall all over themselves in the diplomatic sphere. Putin's using it to buy time. The entire time Putin has been engaged in talks, we have watched rail car after rail car of tanks, missile launchers, aircraft, even ships heading towards Ukraine's border. So again, I think he's buying time.
Now, Congressman, you also have spoken out about the Winter Olympics in China, and we're seeing this, warming of relationships between China and Russia. You know, China taking Russia's side at the UN, potentially being a financier for Russia if sanctions go into place. Could that be a factor in Putin's decision that he doesn't want to offend China as they get center stage during the Winter Olympics?
You know, I think it's a factor, but we have to remember, Tony, that Russia invaded Georgia back in 2008 during the Beijing Summer Olympics. Back then, he invaded Ukraine the first time right after the Sochi Olympics. So dictators love the Olympics. And I think it's going to happen right about the tail end if Putin decides to do it, because the ground will still be hard enough to support his tanks. And things will begin warming up in Ukraine in the spring, and they'll literally get bogged down. But I think the bigger issue, to take it up a level, is this week you're going to see Putin and Xi standing side by side at the Olympics, which we shouldn't be at. By being there, we are turning a blind eye to COVID released on the world and grotesque human rights violations and attacks on Christians and the freedom of religion all over China. But the bottom line is Pu and Xi will be standing side by side, sending a very strong symbolic message that there's a new sheriff in town, and it's not the United States. And I think that is something I don't want our kids or grandkids in a world led by either of them that I want our kids and grandkids growing up in.
I mean, this does complicate the ground there in Ukraine, where we have to also factor in China and their response, because I was talking with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo yesterday, former Secretary of State, and he agrees China is a greater threat to us than Russia.
Absolutely.
They have the intent, but they really don't have a lot of capacity. China has both.
No, absolutely. And I want to be clear, China is our number one threat by far, not even, by a little. And I want to be clear, of course, our border and American borders and our issues here at home should take priority than dealing with Ukraine. That said, it's not an either or. Putin fully intends to recreate the Soviet Union in his image. He's stated so repeatedly, and I do not think he's going to stop with Ukraine. I'm not saying it rises to the level of putting American boots on the ground, but I am saying that Biden should be playing this much more tough. Sanctions should be in place now. There's types of lethal aid we can provide to help the Ukrainians fight for themselves. I was just out there a month ago, and they fully intend to do so. So there's more that we could be doing to frustrate Putin's grand scheme. And I think right now, we have to realize Putin is doing this because he smells weakness in this White House. He believes he can get away with it. He believes he has more to gain than will lose. And at the end of the day, he doesn't believe the Europeans are going to get on board with these tough sanctions because he's got a gun to their head in terms of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and he's created dependency on their gas. And finally, I can't state this enough, Tony, Biden's failed energy policy of moving us away from energy independence has moved the world towards Russian oil and gas and has given Putin the upper hand, made him a lot richer, and we're seeing the world in chaos because of it.
Congressman Waltz, you mentioned the sanctions, that we ought to have sanctions in place now. And that seems to be kind of a stumbling block in the Senate, where there is bipartisan support to support Ukraine and to stop Russia. But it appears the Democrats want sanctions after an invasion. Republicans think it needs to be done now. Any possibility of breakthrough there this week?
We'll see how that moves through the Senate, but I think if it comes through, I hope that we can then move it into the House and push the administration in the right direction. That at the end of the day, you put sanctions in place now, you make Putin feel the pain now, and then you pull them back if he de-escalates. What Biden is doing is basically giving away all of our leverage and not putting any on the table. And, when I was out in Ukraine, they said it doesn't do them a lot of good to talk about tough actions that you're going to take after they're invaded and Russian tanks are sitting in their capital. And I absolutely agree with them. We have to deter Putin from taking these actions on the front end. The other thing that we should be doing, and this Senate bill has provisions to do that, is make it clear that we will continue to resource any type of Ukrainian resistance. It's only if Putin believes that this is going to be a quagmire for him politically and militarily that I think he may think twice about moving forward with an invasion.
Well, you made reference earlier that you're not advocating put troops on the ground. And when you have a strong military, you don't have to use it as much. And
that's right.
I think you've expressed concerns about this. And I want to turn to John Kirby was on Fox News Sunday, and he was asked about wokeness in our nation's military. I want to play this clip and get your response.
I mean, those kinds of arguments, I think are ridiculous, because we are a stronger military because of our diversity and because we represent all Americans, just like we defend all Americans.
Are you concerned about the direction of our military and the wokeness that has infiltrated under this administration?
Oh, I'm absolutely concerned. And Tony, I want to be clear. The U.S. military should be open to all
those
Americans.
Kinds of arguments.
Black, white, or brown, whatever religious background you have, as it always has been. My issue is when you have West Point, the United States and Military Academy, teaching its cadets how to deal with your whiteness and white rage in a seminar that over 100 future leaders of our military attended. When you're teaching them, what the Democrats keep talking about is, well, we should teach, and have an honest accounting of our history. I absolutely agree. What we're talking about is indoctrinating now that you have some citizens that are oppressed, other citizens that are the oppressors because of their skin color, no matter what they've done in their life, and that we have our founding documents that our military has to defend are institutionally and fundamentally racist, misogynist, colonialist. I think that erodes morale. I think that erodes civilian oversight. And you know, the Democrats keep talking about history and diversity training. I'm fine with all of that. What I'm talking about, this kind of CRT-inspired indoctrination that is happening despite their denials. And I have a letter from the West Point of the superintendent of West Point saying CRT 101 is part of their curriculum. And when I hopefully become chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee, which is responsible for training, we're going to ban it and we're going to cut out this cancer.
Well, and I want to talk more about that. Congressman Mike Waltz, always great to have you on. We're out of time. Talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks so much, Tony.